Hello, this is Vision Denial and the road to MSI 2022. My name is Sam, and I go and watch every playoff game from every region that participates in these international tournaments. Yes, including that one. But I've already done that. So what's this video for? Well, this is the Meet the Teams, and today we're meeting Paris Saint-Germain Talons, a regularly upcomer in the international scene, having now done, I believe now 4 different showings in the last 2 years. And honestly, they're a delight, a wonder and a delight, usually. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's jump into it, shall we? Let's meet the two faces of the coaching staff. We've got over here Tom, who previously of Gen G during the 2020 season, and Corgi of the Edward Gaming during the 2020 season. Both have brought in a very good sense of zoning control, as well as 1-4 split pushing to them, to the point where frequently that's the kind of champions that they're getting banned against. They've also put in a caution to make sure to get rid of anything that would be conflicting sieging type playstyle, showing a larger weakness for the team against those who would be able to use some vision denial fairly efficiently. But what does that look like? Well, given the nature of the team, that this is an incredibly dominating team, and I'm very conflicted to talk about Paris Saint-Germain Talons in a way that's like, no, this is a straight up one-sided team on most accounts, because their playoff record does not reflect what these stats tell. On a lot of their good games, they balloon leads like crazy. Their laners are consistently ahead in ways that develop a 1.5k lead regularly just from the first 15 minutes, and they usually win when they hit that particular win rate goal differential. They regularly get the first tower, are almost always making sure to get so many more turrets ahead of time, and on top of it, control neutral objectives solidly well. However, this did not reflect 100% of the time with the playoffs that happened. And unfortunately, it would be a little bit disingenuous for me to say that this is definitely the PSG Talons we're going to be seeing. But it may not be. Granted, historically, they've done well in international scenes. But for the moment, I am hesitant, because the stats look great and their performance on the games they did win were fantastic and looked like their regular selves. And their regular season was literally lossless, or virtually lossless. With that, let's take a look at what their team looks like. Meet Hanabi. Many people of the Southeast Asian fan base from the LMS or from the PCS will recognize him from the Flash Wolves for 2 years, and then going straight to Paris Saint-Germain Talons esports, and has been here for also an equivalently nearly 3 years at this point. And he's been a mainstay and a dominant force since. And straight up, his stats show for it. An incredible set of CS differential at 15 minutes, gold experience at 15 minutes. His KDA reflects it. His kill participation is on par, if not a little bit higher than the average top laner. And he plays side lanes as well as team fights incredibly well. There's nothing but high praise that should be brought on to Hanabi for the way that he actively plays around the map and shows it for most of the year up until the playoffs, where much of that particular type of pressure lend itself to some interesting decision making that didn't always reflect positively towards how PSG would usually play. Otherwise, though, he has also been the most consistent of all the players. Even during the slumps that PSG showed during the playoffs, Hanabi was regularly the one bolstering and keeping up the team. His plays on Gangplank, Nar, and Trinimir particularly have done a lot to keep the ball rolling. Meet Juhan. Regularly just a very proactive player on his team, he doesn't have the largest amount of flexibility to his roster. Most of what he has over here sets up team fights and regularly requires him to be a carry for his team. He does have a high enough first blood participation and sets up for his lanes fairly well, while still keeping at least a camp ahead at 15 minutes, on average at least. He is, however, a little bit less notable than his counterparts for his league, despite his consistency, and primarily because of his lack of flexibility in his pool. They could become a problem when it comes to facing off against the other junglers in the international scene. Nothing about Juhan's playing during the playoffs or regular season struck out to me other than very consistent for the most part. He regularly helps his lanes ahead. He makes sure that his neutral setups are good. And outside of the fact that the Talons had been very lackluster during the playoff season, Juhan has been rather consistent, if not under the radar for the most part. But this player from the Nongshan Red Force challenger scene has been at least a nice, consistent force for them. Meet Bay. Many of you will be fine to see Bay over here, also regularly from the Nongshan Challenger team, coming in with Juhan. He's also been a fairly consistent factor. Nothing about him strikes me as huge or very strong compared to the rest of the mid laners that existed within the PCS, but he's consistent, if not a little inflexible with his roster. Bolstering one of the smaller rosters for his champion pool, he might mostly played a lot of Rise if the 11 games weren't anything to say, and most of his playstyle was intended to create space. If the space that was created helped the rest of his team bring in those wins, then perfect. He stayed consistently ahead, if not even for the most part, and honestly was a well-rounded player. I just wish that he would have a little bit more flexibility with his champion pool. But who needs that flexibility if it brought you all of those wins? I just think that given the team, given like the international caliber of a lot of the other mid laners coming in, that he might have some difficulty with some of them. The key is just some of them. Otherwise, his consistency will probably be a very nice factor in terms of nullifying things. Many of you who are fans of the LMS or the PCS for quite some time will recognize Unified, who has been in the scene since 2016 and has been with the Talons for nearly 2.5 years at this point. With it, he is the star of the show when it comes to the Talons. And frankly, it makes sense. He has a huge record being part of the majority of where the team plays around. He unfortunately is a little bit inflexible in terms of his roster, bolstering one of the smallest rosters out of the entirety of every marksman in the international scene. Where he does make up for his inflexibility is his consistency to be ahead and to be a playmaker and team fight prodigy. Too bad he didn't show much of that during the playoffs, where he seemed to be a little bit under the weather and inconsistent, if not very poor in terms of his playstyle. Again, much like the rest of PSG, Unified was it had a larger impact in terms of their play in the playoffs, because he showed nothing at all about what his record would indicate from the regular season. I just hope that given that a lot of the different teams that he's going to be facing off against, some with incredible caliber for their marksmen and others with less, that he would be able to at least stand up to those with large caliber and be able to really dunk on the rest. Otherwise, I don't know where his regular season form went, because if we see playoff unified, we may be a little disappointed for what is to come. Finally, we have Kaiwing. And Kaiwing, equally, if many of you are fans of the LMS or the PCS, will recognize him as part of the scene since at least 2016. He's been with the Talons just as long as Unified has, and these two have made storms as being the premier bot lane duo. But equally, just as Unified had some lackluster playoff performance, so did Kaiwing. Being a strong enabler of the teamfight setups as well as the vision play for Saint-Germain Talons, that didn't really translate during the playoff games. Kaiwing showed himself to be a little bit more out of place, out of position, and too far forward in moments that he did not need to be. But that said, when he was on point, he was on point. And so, hopefully, Kaiwing can bolster up some of his issues and really bring forward the caliber that he usually brings with Unified coming MSI. So, given this, it's no surprise that many people view Saint-Germain Talons as a dominant force within the league and should be expected to make great strides and fantastic performance coming into the mid-season invitational. There's some concern over their very bizarre performance and honestly their just presence of mind coming in from their playoffs, but how they've played the entirety of the season and their historical record in the international scene should quell some of those doubts, but not get rid of them entirely. It really depends on whether or not we see regular season or playoffs Saint-Germain Talons, or even if we see something in between before we can actually really tell if they're up to par. Otherwise, it could be a disappointment. I'm hoping it's not. I'm really hoping we get to see regular season Talons. You guys let me know what you think down below. If you enjoyed this video, like, comment, and subscribe. I'll be doing these Meet the Teams for the next little bit. With that, I'll see you next time. Bye.